A sprawling, walled metropolis known as the labyrinth city of Geralt rests peacefully between lush fields and distant mountains. Inside a bustling registration hall, a tiny braided-haired girl sits on a stool at the immigration counter while seasoned travelers wait in line. The young traveler blinks in utter confusion as the clerk's words completely catch her off guard. Leaning closer with a strange smile, she politely asks the stern receptionist to repeat the baffling statement. The devastating truth hangs heavily in the air as she is flatly denied permission to build a new house. Her desperate, echoing shout of absolute disbelief rings out across the city's stone-paved streets. Confronting the receptionist, the girl named Chris points out the city's reputation for freedom, only to be sternly reminded that she isn't a citizen of Perua. The clerk patiently clarifies that while the labyrinth city welcomes everyone, foreign travelers are strictly forbidden from constructing their own homes. Gripping her cloak tightly, the anxious girl pleads to know exactly how she can earn citizenship in this strict country. Her eyes widen in sheer horror as the receptionist bluntly shatters her hopes by calling the feat completely impossible. The crushing bureaucratic reality sets in as she learns that citizenship and building rights are granted only to immigrants after 3 generations of permanent residency. Clinging to a shred of optimism, the girl eagerly asks if she can at least find work. Though the clerk warns that securing a job without a formal introduction is extremely difficult, the conversation shifts as it becomes clear that while normal employment is heavily restricted for foreigners, registered adventurers operate under different rules. The receptionist stares blankly, her face a mask of silent, judgmental skepticism. When the girl innocently claims she has survived by taking official guild jobs on the road, the sweating clerk openly accuses the tiny child of making a mockery of the dangerous adventurer profession. Hopping down from her oversized wooden stool, the girl proudly declares that she has survived the brutal frontier for 2 years and will simply work to save up travel funds. Standing firm with a heavy sigh, she admits defeat regarding her dream of settling down in the city and decides to pivot her plans. With a fiery glare of renewed determination, she vows to march over to the combat counter and register strictly as a battle-hardened adventurer rather than a lowly immigrant. Pouting fiercely, the tiny warrior stomps away from the immigration desk, leaving the dumbfounded receptionist staring at her back. As the girl approaches a new clerk, grand narration reveals that the labyrinth city of Geralt was originally just a humble, fertile land by the sea. The historical account continues, explaining that the sudden manifestation of the underground labyrinth known as Pyrini transformed the quiet land into a booming major city. Fumbling through her worn leather pouches, the determined child eagerly retrieves her official credentials. She firmly presses her battered Adventurer's Guild card into the waiting hand of the new receptionist. Staring ahead with quiet resolve, she mentally reflects on how she traveled all this way believing Geralt was the perfect forever home, anxious to finish up because her companion is waiting. Waiting patiently inside a wooden stable, a loyal brown horse watches the entrance alongside a white mare. The girl's cheerful voice calls out an apology to her beloved steed, Peru-chan, for the agonizing delay. Grabbing her horse's reins with a victorious smile, she leads Peru-chan forward and celebrates that they can finally enter the city proper. Realizing that the fading evening light means the local inns are likely packed to the brim, she quickly pivots to finding immediate shelter. Standing near the massive stone gateway, she looks up at her faithful mount and pitches a simple backup plan to rest near the outer wall. The weary duo approach a modest, quiet stable tucked against the outer fence, hoping to secure a safe resting place for the night. The young girl gasps in utter shock, demanding to know why she cannot stay at the stable. 2 stable hands gently but firmly refuse her request, explaining that sleeping outside is strictly prohibited for safety reasons in such a dangerous city. Unconvinced, she argues that the countryside is far more terrifying, but the taller man quickly dismisses her naivety. She passionately recounts her own near-death experiences with towering wolves and sudden monster attacks to prove that the city's outskirts are no place for a child. Shifting his tone to a grave warning, the older stable hand points out that malicious adults who prey on vulnerable little girls also roam the dark streets. The men groan in shared frustration as the stubborn girl points out that she has absolutely nowhere else to go tonight. Defeated by her desperate situation, the older man points toward a secure corner near the manager's quarters and reluctantly allows her to stay. Softening their stern demeanor, they promise to stand guard until dawn and kindly offer to fetch fresh straw for her makeshift bed. Her face immediately lights up with a radiant, grateful smile as she thanks them profusely for their unexpected mercy. Sighing at the sheer absurdity of a lone child sleeping in a barn, they nervously offer to give her directions to the local orphanage. Ignoring their lingering concerns, the young traveler heads directly into the wooden stall to settle in beside her massive steed. Clapping her hands together cheerfully, she proudly declares that their humble bed for the night is finally prepared. Taking a well-deserved break, she happily munches on a piece of wrapped bread while resting against her horse's warm flank. Watching Peruchan eat dry fodder from a wooden bucket, she apologizes to the beast and promises to buy fresh vegetables the very next day. Her cheerful expression suddenly hardens into a serious glare as she internally acknowledges that while bad adults are dangerous, true terror comes from monsters. Gazing toward the dark boundary, she remembers that the desolate areas near any city's outer walls are constantly threatened by lurking beasts. To ensure their absolute safety, she realizes she must deploy an essential defensive magic capable of completely sealing off their immediate area from intruders. Reaching into her worn leather pouches, she retrieves a specialized magical paper designed for those who lack innate magical skills. She examines the intricate rune-covered disposable slip, which allows anyone to cast potent spells using only a fraction of their own magical power. Knowing that such an expensive and rare item would draw unwanted attention to a vulnerable child, she vows to use it strictly in secret. Concentrating her focus, she holds up the defensive talisman and prepares to infuse it with her latent energy. Standing protectively in front of Peruchan and their gear, she activates the artifact to cast a wide, invisible ward around their stall. With a swift flick of her fingers, the magical paper instantly burns away into a scattering of ethereal sparks. She pouts in mild annoyance as the highly expensive paper vanishes into thin air the exact second its spell takes effect. Reaching back into her supplies, she reveals a remarkably thick, hidden stack of these incredibly rare and valuable talismans. Despite the powerful magical barrier now protecting them, a lingering sense of unease continues to gnaw at the young girl's heart. Leaning back against her sleeping horse, she bitterly regrets rushing to this labyrinth city only to discover that her dreams of settling down were hopelessly naive. Her bright eyes dim with profound melancholy as she stares off into the dark, cold corners of the stable. Staring up at the wooden rafters, she mourns the rapid death of her simple dream to rent a room, stabilize her chaotic life, and eventually build a true home. The painful longing triggers a sudden flashback, revealing that she harbored the exact same desperate desire for a home in her past life. A horrifying memory flashes through her mind of a sudden, brutal instant when a mysterious force sliced through her body, abruptly ending her previous existence. Escaping the bloody memory, the reincarnated soul drifts to sleep against her horse, trapped in a harsh fantasy world and entirely disconnected from her original Earth. The young girl remembers turning 10 and suddenly regaining the memories of her past life while standing amid swirling darkness. With a determined and battle-hardened expression, she recalls arriving here after a long, grueling journey. Looking up with a resigned sigh, she silently acknowledges her sudden misfortune. Leaning her head back, she quietly murmurs that life always seems to throw these cruel twists her way. The massive horse affectionately nudges the despondent girl, snapping her right out of her gloomy thoughts. Blinking in surprise, she gives her concerned steed a reassuring wink and insists she isn't feeling down at all. Stroking the animal's muzzle, she resolves to keep grinding as an adventurer and taking side jobs to fund her move to a new town. She reflects on Peruchan's gentle heart, grateful that the tough beast has fiercely protected her like a daughter since they met a year ago. The horse gently prods her again, prompting her to chuckle and playfully ask if he is telling her to go to sleep. Leaning affectionately against the large animal, she plans to tackle side jobs tomorrow and sell pouch items if her remaining funds run dry. A brilliant, unyielding smile lights up her face as she firmly promises herself that she will never give up. Staring into the distance with unwavering determination, she vows that she will absolutely build her own house someday. The grand labyrinth city rests peacefully beneath a quiet, cloudy sky. Stretching her arms wide with a joyful shout, the girl celebrates her first peaceful night of sleep in a very long time. The older stable hand approaches to check on the energetic little miss, glad to find her in such high spirits. She mentions wanting to cook breakfast, but he quickly shuts down the idea of using fire since it terrifies the surrounding horses. Offering a helpful alternative, the man advises her to take a single copper coin to the nearby morning market. Recognizing that she is new to Geralt, he issues a stern warning to avoid the north gate at all costs, sparking her confused curiosity. Her expression turns dead serious as the man bluntly explains that the northern sector is a dangerous slum. He details how the area devolved from a barren military training ground into a lawless shanty town plagued by terrible security. Nodding politely in thanks, she silently marvels that even a massive, prosperous city harbors such deep, dangerous shadows. Turning back to Peruchan, she decides it is time to properly tidy up her appearance before heading into the bustling streets. She knows the strict city guards will immediately refuse her entry if she approaches looking like a dust-covered vagabond. With practiced efficiency, the young adventurer begins gathering her scattered belongings. Fully packed and geared up, she stands proudly beside her horse with a confident nod. Reaching swiftly into her coat, she produces a crisp, blank slip of magical paper. Holding the glowing talisman near her chest, she firmly commands the spell to cast a cleansing aura. She admits that using the spell is a bit of a luxury, but expanding the magical range over her luggage ensures everything is spotless in one go. Bending down, she carefully adjusts her clean boots to prepare for the long day ahead. She stands up and gives herself a final critical once-over. Throwing her arms out to show off her pristine gear, she cheerfully declares that her new look is absolutely perfect. Peru-chan offers an approving whinny as the girl announces her plan to hit the market before submitting her relocation notice at the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Gazing in awe at the sprawling metropolis, the young adventurer marvels at the massive walls enclosing the labyrinth city. Navigating through the bustling morning market, she takes in the lively atmosphere with her heavy pack secured on her back. Weaving through the crowded stalls, she smiles brightly at the abundance of fresh produce on display. Staring at a half-sized sandwich, she bitterly complains that 1 copper coin should buy a growing girl at least double the food. Her eyes suddenly widen in delight as she spots a fantastic deal offering 5 vegetable skewers for a single copper coin. Eagerly reaching across the wooden counter, she happily trades her coin with the friendly vendor for the fresh meal. Holding up a delicious vegetable skewer, her face completely lights up with a radiant, satisfied smile. While she happily munches on her breakfast, a curious stall owner notices her genuine amazement at the local produce. The friendly merchant points out her wide-eyed wonder and kindly asks if this is her very first time visiting Girl. Beaming with excitement, she enthusiastically confirms her newcomer status, prompting the merchant to offer a helpful guide to the city. Soon, multiple friendly locals gather around the tiny adventurer, eagerly chiming in to teach her all about their massive home. She quickly learns that Geralt is divided into 5 massive districts, with a wealthy ruling class residing safely in the south, far away from the northwestern labyrinth. The merchants explain that the northern sector acts as a lively downtown packed with inns and shops explicitly catering to rugged adventurers. Shifting to a more serious tone, they warn her that the perimeter near the outer wall is a notoriously dangerous slum district. Continuing the geography lesson, they describe the eastern commercial district and a bustling port town at the city's edge known for processing fresh seafood. Glancing around, she realizes that her current location in the western sector serves as the main entrance for travelers and is dominated by vast agricultural fields. Absorbing the overwhelming influx of information, the young girl blinks in quiet realization at the sheer scale of the metropolis. Spotting a large multi-passenger wagon drawn by 2 horses rolling down the cobblestone street, she curiously asks if it is a shared carriage. She learns that ordinary citizens rely on these shared transports because riding a personal horse within the walls requires expensive permits and strict registration. Looking down with a determined pout, she stubbornly vows that she will never abandon Peru-chan just to comply with the city's restrictive residency laws. Adapting to the strict rules, she resolves to simply lead her faithful steed by the reins and take him outside the gates for proper exercise. Arriving before an imposing stone structure, the tiny traveler tilts her head and wonders if she has finally found her destination. Standing bravely before the grand, sword-emblazoned double doors, she takes a deep breath and prepares to enter the Adventurers Guild headquarters. A tiny braided-haired girl stands outside a grand stone building, staring up in awe at its impressive architecture. Inside, the sprawling guild hall bustles with seasoned adventurers gathering around busy counters and wooden bulletin boards. Peeking nervously around a wooden pillar, the young girl takes in the lively atmosphere of the crowded room. She gazes wide-eyed, completely mesmerized by the sheer scale of the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Stepping confidently up to the wooden counter, she officially requests to submit her relocation notice. The elegant blonde receptionist blinks down at her in sheer bewilderment. Quickly regaining her professional composure, the clerk politely apologizes and agrees to handle the necessary paperwork. Looking over the provided documents, the receptionist carefully verifies that the tiny adventurer's name is Chris Nina. Nina firmly confirms her identity, explaining that her last official job was back in the town of Sursud before she traveled via the last highway. The clerk gently taps a glowing magical crystal on her desk to officially confirm the young traveler's background. Grand narration reveals that mysterious spirit trees power a unique global network functioning much like an expansive magical database. Nina watches the seamless process in silent awe, privately comparing the crystal's data check to a modern contactless payment machine from her past life. The lore continues, noting that only highly valued individuals with a rare jackpot skill can perform the initial setup and maintenance of these magical trees. Returning her attention to the girl, the clerk notes with a warm smile that Nina has been completing requests so smoothly that she is about to rank up from copper to silver. Leaning forward curiously, the receptionist asks if the young copper-ranked adventurer came specifically to challenge the dangerous Pyrene labyrinth. She sternly warns that lower-ranked adventurers typically need to join established high-ranked parties just to safely operate inside the deadly dungeon. When Nina clarifies that she only wants to take standard jobs within or just outside the city, the clerk advises her to visit the Western District branch instead. Realizing she will not be visiting headquarters often, Nina eagerly asks if there are any free archives or books she can read to gather local information. The clerk grimaces slightly, explaining that official guild information comes with a steep minimum price of 3 silver coins per piece. She further adds that while there is an archive on the second floor, strict rules completely forbid anyone from taking those materials outside. Nodding in quiet understanding, Nina absorbs the heavy financial reality of official intelligence gathering. Pointing toward a nearby cafe area, the clerk kindly suggests that treating fellow adventurers to drinks is a far cheaper way to gather local rumors. Offering a warm, reassuring smile, the helpful receptionist formally introduces herself as Anna. Grateful for the advice, Nina thanks Anna, who promises to answer simple questions for free and clearly state any fees up front. Anna sternly warns the child to gather information only within the safety of the guild hall, as the staff's presence keeps dangerous individuals at bay. As Nina cheerfully agrees, a lingering look of deep skepticism crosses Anna's face as she silently questions whether the tiny child is truly 13 years old. Shaking off her lingering doubts, Anna warmly reminds the young girl to make sure she eats properly to keep her strength up. With an energetic spring in her step, the tiny adventurer eagerly scurries away toward the lively tavern section of the guild. 2 seasoned male adventurers sit quietly at a round wooden table by the window, taking a hard-earned break from their duties. Marching up to the bar with total confidence, Nina stretches out her arm and loudly orders ale for the gentleman sitting nearby. 3 large frothy wooden tankards of ale are promptly prepared, resting heavily on the smooth tavern counter. Joining the 2 bewildered men at their table, Nina listens intently as they explain that most headquarters requests involve dangerous monster hunting or plant gathering inside the Pyrene labyrinth. Nina learns that high-ranked adventurers usually handle difficult jobs such as hunting rare monsters or escorting valuable beasts to the royal capital. The men explain that they are checking the board on their day off because good requests are strictly first come, first served. They note that accepting a request requires immediately gathering party members in order to beat rival groups to rare labyrinth monsters. Nina mentions her simpler plan to hunt safely in the forest outside the city's outer walls for a while. The older adventurer looks concerned and asks whether the little miss will truly be safe working out there completely alone. Flashing a confident smile, she reassures them by stating that she has a reliable draft horse accompanying her. Realizing that her horse possesses monster-sensing skills and exceptional stamina, the men agree that working outside suits her perfectly. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, one adventurer notes that the outer forest falls directly under the Western District branch's jurisdiction. He leans over the table and quickly scribbles a note onto a small piece of paper. Handing over the fresh note, he advises her to present it to his friend stationed at the Western branch. Nina stares at the slip while he explains that his kitchen friend, Eve, looks intimidating but is actually incredibly reliable. Kane smiles warmly and assures her that the note simply asks Eve to help a girl named Chris. He warns her not to push herself too hard since their headquarters team will not be nearby to assist. Holding the precious paper closely, she silently marvels at receiving such an expensive item in this harsh world. Her face erupts into a radiant, closed-eye smile as she joyfully thanks the 2 seasoned men. Kane and his companions smile back with genuine warmth at the energetic young adventurer. Nina steps out of the guild and walks briskly down the sunlit cobblestone street. Walking away from headquarters, she happily reflects on the unexpected kindness of Anna and Kane. Glancing at the sky, she realizes it is already noon and urgently shifts her focus to securing a local inn. The tiny traveler halts near a large stone corner to reorient herself within the massive city layout. Noting that the path ahead leads directly toward the northern district, she decides to take a quick scenic detour. She wanders into a narrow, winding alleyway framed by towering vine-covered stone buildings. Looking up in absolute awe, she softly gasps at the densely packed, heavily cluttered architecture. A cheerful grin spreads across her face as she finds the chaotic, patched-up environment surprisingly fun. Her wandering abruptly stops as debris suddenly crumbles and clatters near her feet. She looks up to inspect a dangerously deteriorated stone bridge arching precariously between two buildings. The crumbling masonry looks so fragile that it threatens to collapse under the slightest pressure. Staring intently at the structural damage, she simply cannot tear her eyes away from the dangerous architecture. She theorizes that her unique house-building skill makes her hyper-aware of these glaring structural flaws. Snapping out of her architectural trance, she panics and remembers her urgent mission to find immediate lodging. Hurrying along, she recalls a specific recommendation given to her by the friendly morning market farmers. Leading her horse through the streets, she heads toward a family-run inn near the outer wall, praised for its cheap rates and welcoming atmosphere. Spotting her destination down the street, the young traveler eagerly points out the building. A neatly carved wooden sign proudly marks the establishment as the Spirit's Perch Inn. An energetic woman wearing a bandana steps outside to ask the little miss if she needs a room. Nina enthusiastically declares her intention to rent a room for a long-term stay. Bursting into hearty laughter, the delighted innkeeper warmly welcomes her new customer. The kind woman expresses genuine sympathy for the young child traveling all alone at such a tender age. Stepping forward, the innkeeper's son, Loki, kindly offers to take good care of the draft horse in the adjacent stable. Nina smiles brightly as she formally introduces herself to the hospitable family. The modest but tidy bedroom features a sturdy wooden bed and a clean desk facing a bright window. The innkeeper kindly tells the tiny traveler to call for her if she needs anything at all. Exhausted from her long day, Nina slumps down onto the edge of the soft mattress. Throwing her arms wide, the cheerful girl falls back onto the bed to finally enjoy a peaceful rest. Staring up at the ceiling, she quietly reflects on the incredibly long journey from her remote hometown. A somber flashback begins, revealing that her entire life drastically changed after undergoing a late birthright ceremony at age 10. Historical narration explains that local priests typically perform the birthright to reveal a newborn's God-given name and innate skills. The historical account details how most babies receive useful skills that vastly accelerate their learning speed. Heartbreakingly, the narrator reveals that her father refused to name her because frontier villages never receive visits from priests. A brutally cruel flashback shows an angry adult hurling a heavy sack at the tiny, cowering child while calling her completely useless. The battered little girl clutches her hands and tearfully apologizes to her abusive father. Looming over her with burning rage, her father threatens to sell her off if her future skills prove worthless. Silent narration notes that basic abilities like floor cleaning are widely considered dud skills by society. In this unforgiving world, individuals who fail to manifest multiple strong skills by adulthood are ruthlessly cast aside as complete failures. The gloomy history continues, revealing that her hometown was originally formed by outcasts surviving near a harsh penal colony. Tragic memories explain that her frail mother passed away shortly after giving birth to her. The devastating loss drove her grief-stricken father to treat his only daughter with increasing cruelty. Staring blankly ahead, the young child silently endures her bleak and loveless existence. Seeking any comfort available, the little girl spends her days helping a friendly local witch to escape her miserable home life. Fate finally intervenes when a wandering priest unexpectedly arrives in their desolate frontier village. Sitting nervously on a wooden stool, the 10-year-old girl waits as the priest prepares the magical appraisal tool. The glowing crystal formally declares her true name to be Chris Nina and reveals her sole skill as house building. Her father's eyes widen in sheer disgust as he registers the incredibly mundane skill. Enraged by the vague and seemingly useless ability, the furious man violently lunges forward while a bystander struggles to restrain him. A concerned villager gently checks on the terrified little girl as chaos erupts in the small room. Her eyes widen in a sudden, overwhelming moment of absolute clarity. Sitting quietly on her bed in the present, Nina admits that she had always felt different but truly understood her reality on that fateful day. The profound shock of the appraisal fully awakened her reincarnated memories from a past life on Earth. Echoes of her father's brutal threat to sell her away violently ring through her restored mind. Forming a desperate plan, the determined child realizes she cannot remain in that abusive village for another second. Knowing that her father would follow through on his cruel promise, she quietly plots her immediate escape. Throwing herself at the mercy of the visiting clergy, the desperate girl successfully begs the priests to take her far away from her father. Escaping her dark past, she officially begins her long, grueling journey to find a true place to belong. Hiding fearfully from a massive tusked monster, she quickly learns that surviving in this skill-driven world is far harsher than her past life on Earth. Clenching her fist with fierce determination, she proudly vows to use her adult memories to survive despite possessing only a mundane building skill. Reaching confidently into her worn leather pouch, the young adventurer firmly grasps a hidden trump card. Flashing a sly smirk, she reveals a powerful magical paper taught to her by the village witch. Sitting quietly at a sturdy wooden desk, the young girl prepares a fresh sheet of paper and a bottle of ink. She confidently decides that handcrafting and selling magical paper is a surefire way to earn travel funds. Gripping her pen tightly, she diligently traces intricate patterns despite lacking the specialized skill normally required for the task. She acknowledges that recreating the complex magical runes from memory demands an incredible amount of exhausting effort. A bittersweet memory surfaces of the agonizing days she spent constantly failing under the witch's strict tutelage. With a fierce and determined glare, she firmly asserts that sheer perseverance can overcome the lack of a magical skill. Humming a cheerful tune, she happily embraces the meticulous drawing process as a perfect distraction in a world devoid of entertainment. She proudly shows off 10 flawless sheets of highly valuable magical paper covered in dense runic text. Ensuring her financial stability, she thoughtfully decides to draft a few extra magical sheets for her own personal survival. She carefully inspects the uniquely compact talismans designed specifically by her mentor to be easily concealed. Resting her cheek against her hand, she peacefully visualizes a future where she saves enough money to finally find a forever home. Dreading the thought of sleeping on the cold ground again, she contemplates purchasing a sturdy horse-drawn carriage for her travels. Her bright eyes suddenly widen as a revolutionary idea strikes her. She excitedly realizes that a well-furnished carriage functions exactly like a mobile home. A brilliant aura of realization surrounds her as she loudly declares that she can apply her supposedly useless skill to a wagon. A vivid flashback transports her back to her hometown, where she stands helplessly before a crumbling lumber shed. She remembers freezing in absolute panic when the witch casually ordered her to repair the massive wooden structure. Tapping her cheek thoughtfully, she recalls desperately searching for a solution to the seemingly impossible task. Her mind shifts toward the tiny mice scurrying through the wooden planks. She carefully ponders whether the rodents genuinely consider the ruined shed to be their home. Staring intently at the weathered wood, she successfully reframes the storage unit as a literal house for mice. The defining concept of a house echoes powerfully through her awakened mind. The exact second she accepted the structure as a home, a flood of advanced architectural knowledge instantly filled her brain. Kneeling with a hammer in hand, she marvels at how her body automatically moved to execute the flawless repairs. A magnificent and perfectly restored wooden shed stands as absolute proof of her hidden potential. Flashing a radiant smile, she finally understands that her magic activates purely based on her personal definition of a home. Snapping back to the present, she logically deduces that modifying a cheap used carriage is far more efficient than building one from scratch. Her cheeks flush with overwhelming excitement as her brilliant master plan fully comes together. Thrusting her fists triumphantly into the air, she enthusiastically shouts her readiness to acquire serious wealth. She proudly marches toward the towering magic guild with high hopes of securing a premium price for her goods. Leaning eagerly over the wooden counter, she presents her handmade talismans to a deeply skeptical guild appraiser. The stern clerk immediately halts her excitement by bluntly asking whether she possesses the official magical skills required for the craft. A stern-faced clerk at the magic guild stares down skeptically at the tiny girl. He scoffs at her ridiculously low asking price of 3 silver coins. Laughing condescendingly, he demands that she at least look at a real product before trying to negotiate. Upon learning that she lacks the required magical skill, he angrily dismisses her handmade items as completely worthless. Ignoring her desperate protests that other towns bought them, he stubbornly refuses to do business. Frustrated but determined, the young adventurer pivots and heads straight back to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Bursting through the doors, she urgently cries out to Anna that she needs to sell her magical paper. Anna sweats nervously as the tiny girl complains about being lowballed and wonders aloud whether the Magic Guild pays better. Examining the papers more closely, the receptionist's eyes widen in sheer amazement at the beautifully drawn magical patterns. Recognizing their true value, Anna instantly drops her casual demeanor and agrees to open official negotiations. Shortly afterward, the tiny adventurer sits formally at a wooden table across from Anna and a new guild official. The friendly man warmly introduces himself as Watts, the guild's primary item appraiser. Holding the parchment close to his face, Watts breaks into a cold sweat as he meticulously inspects the flawless runic work. A wide smile spreads across his face as he praises the excellent craftsmanship, thoroughly shocked to find advanced magic among the stack. Turning to Anna, he confidently confirms that the handmade papers are completely flawless and ready for use. With the quality officially verified, the appraiser excitedly shifts the conversation directly to pricing. He casually lists the staggering market values, noting that advanced sheets fetch 15 gold coins while beginner ones sell for 8 silver. Nina's eyes widen with intense focus as the high-stakes financial negotiations officially begin. Watts explains that selling her stock through the commercial guild or local shops would result in massive tax deductions. He warns her that the commercial guild is notorious for imposing brutally strict conditions and heavy taxes on non-members. Fortunately, since she is already a registered adventurer, selling directly to their guild dramatically lowers her tax burden. The appraiser smiles warmly, praising the young girl's sharp intellect for understanding the complex market so quickly. Shrugging off a brief moment of confusion, he chuckles and admits that it is absolutely no wonder Anna has taken such a liking to her. Getting back to serious business, Watts proposes a formal arrangement in which she makes regular deliveries as a designated request. He outlines a lucrative weekly contract, offering premium rates for her advanced magical paper alongside a generous request fee. Her face lights up with absolute joy as she realizes this steady arrangement guarantees a highly stable income. Leaning over the table with an energetic shout, the eager child instantly agrees to the incredible deal. Watts and Anna exchange sweat drops of mild surprise as the overly enthusiastic girl happily commits to the heavy workload. Suddenly, a crucial thought crosses her mind, causing her bright eyes to widen in quiet realization. Showing wisdom beyond her years, she cautiously asks for a penalty exemption in case sudden illness or injury prevents her from fulfilling a delivery. Deeply impressed by her professional foresight, the appraiser acknowledges that failing a formal request would indeed cause severe problems. Nodding in complete agreement, he asks her to wait while he prepares the official contract to make their new partnership effective immediately. A smiling woman sets a wooden tankard down on the table between Nina and Anna. Nina cheerfully grabs the drink, genuinely glad she came to them for business. She takes a sip from the tankard while listening to Anna explain the guild's strained relationship with the Magic Guild due to severe price gouging. Anna passionately points out that the Magic Guild ruthlessly exploits the fact that half of all adventurers rely on magical paper. Nina realizes that this heavy reliance is entirely due to the dangers of the nearby underground labyrinth. Anna confirms that deploying magical paper is an essential survival tactic for conserving energy in the deadly dungeon. The tiny adventurer thoughtfully wonders whether she should focus her efforts on crafting more barrier magic. She notes that basic body enhancement and healing spells would be highly useful for beginners as well. Watts chimes in, explaining that support magic sells incredibly well since most adventurers prioritize offensive skills. However, the appraiser advises her to supply offensive magic as well to ensure a perfectly balanced inventory. He explains that while monsters grow stronger deeper in the labyrinth, dangerous outbreaks occasionally push them to the upper levels. In those terrifying moments, desperate adventurers have absolutely no choice but to rely on advanced offensive magic to survive. Eager to secure her business, Watts happily offers to cover her taxes as a generous first-time bonus. Nina's eyes widen in sheer disbelief at the unbelievably lucrative deal falling right into her lap. Anna clasps her hands together and admits that they were desperate for her help since the Magic Guild recently restricted their supply. Watts hopes to secure a long-term arrangement but kindly promises they will never force her to stay against her will. He warmly offers their constant support and advice whenever the young traveler needs it. Anna winks playfully, adding that their help extends far beyond matters of magical paper. A massive heartwarming smile stretches across Nina's face as the tension finally leaves her shoulders. She beams brightly and thanks them both profusely for their overwhelming kindness. Internally, she celebrates the glorious realization that seasoned professionals genuinely recognize her hard-earned skills. Anna smiles back, officially placing the guild's trust in the tiny adventurer's future deliveries. Nina suddenly remembers a crucial task and politely raises her hand to ask an important question. The blonde receptionist blinks in surprise when the young girl asks where she can purchase a used carriage. She immediately pivots to help, offering to write a formal letter of introduction to a trusted merchant named Gowries. Anna explains that Gowries runs a bustling lumber workshop that frequently takes in old wooden carriages. Holding the precious introduction letter closely to her chest, Nina excitedly celebrates this major step toward building her mobile home. Before Nina leaves, Anna checks to make sure the newcomer has already registered at the local Western District branch. The receptionist gently reminds her that bronze-ranked adventurers must complete at least one general request every 2 weeks. Nina breaks into a cold sweat, realizing that she completely forgot about the strict and unforgiving quota. An establishing shot reveals the modest wooden interior of the Western District Adventurers Guild branch. Nina immediately rushes over to the counter to speak with the local receptionist and secure a quick job. Walking away from the counter, she passes a muscular horned adventurer quietly drinking his ale in the corner. The large warrior shifts slightly, his imposing physical presence undeniable. As she walks by, Nina stops before a large wooden bulletin board heavily plastered with various job requests. She ponders her options, heavily leaning toward a safe herb-gathering mission in the forest over manual farm labor. A deep, intimidating voice suddenly calls out from behind, bluntly asking if she is the runt named Chris. Nina tenses up completely as a massive shadow looms ominously over her tiny frame. The towering horned cook from the tavern stares down at her with an intense, unreadable expression. Nina looks up with wide, cautious eyes as she faces the giant stranger confronting her. Standing her ground with her arms firmly crossed, the tiny adventurer stares up at the towering man with an unyielding expression. Meeting his gaze without a single hint of fear, she firmly confirms that she is indeed the adventurer named Chris. Standing before her, the massive warrior cook blinks down at her and bluntly points out just how incredibly tiny she is in person. Her confident demeanor instantly shatters into utter confusion as she glares back with an irritated grunt. Catching her fierce reaction, the giant man freezes as a bead of nervous sweat rolls down his face. Narrowing her eyes into a vicious glare, the little girl silently judges the towering stranger blocking her path. Dropping her intense stare, she bitterly complains that constantly looking up at him is starting to seriously hurt her neck. She deadpans through the awkward silence, completely unimpressed by the giant warrior's intimidating presence. Hoping to clear up the sudden misunderstanding, the large man retrieves a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Ignoring him completely, the tiny traveler turns on her heel and briskly walks away while he frantically begs her to wait. Desperately explaining his presence, Eve reveals that Kane sent him to check on her, though he admits there is no actual emergency. He stares in sheer disbelief as the little miss completely disregards his heartfelt explanation. Marching right up to the front desk, she casually confirms a herb-gathering request with a receptionist named Yuria. Pointing an accusatory finger back at the giant, she fiercely demands that Yuria report him to the authorities as a highly suspicious individual. As the little girl playfully sticks out her tongue, Eve desperately defends his actions while Yuria merely giggles at the chaotic scene. Cutting through the loud bickering, the elegant receptionist softly calls out the flustered warrior's name. Yuria sternly reprimands Eve, reminding him that speaking so arrogantly to a polite young lady would naturally make anyone uncomfortable. The massive warrior visibly shrinks under the receptionist's sharp scolding, a deep wave of guilt washing over his face. Swallowing his immense pride, Eve awkwardly rubs the back of his neck and offers a genuine apology to the tiny adventurer. Instantly dropping her hostility, she offers her own sweet apology for acting immaturely, causing the giant to sigh in profound relief. With the conflict peacefully resolved, the young girl cheerfully thanks Yuria for wishing her luck on her upcoming assignment. When Eve asks if she is heading to the forest immediately, she politely clarifies that her gathering mission is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The large warrior awkwardly asks if they can properly chat then, prompting a hesitant, sweat-filled agreement from the bewildered child. Walking away from the guild, she internally notes that she does not actually need any protection or help from the seasoned veteran. Suddenly, her mind completely shifts gears toward her true goal as she arrives at a bustling, dust-filled lumber workshop. Standing boldly before the workshop owner, Gowries, she confidently declares her wild intention to purchase and modify a used carriage into a mobile home. Recognizing her absolute seriousness, the bewildered craftsman listens as she proudly presents her official guild introduction letter. Brimming with unwavering confidence, the tiny builder assures him that the seemingly impossible project will be effortless thanks to her unique house-building skill. The seasoned craftsman openly doubts her unheard-of ability. But she cheerfully insists that transforming a wagon into a moving home is entirely within her power. Stroking his thick beard with a spark of genuine intrigue, Gowries thoughtfully considers the sheer audacity of her grand proposal. Flashing a rugged, welcoming smile, the burly workshop owner enthusiastically waves the surprised little girl deeper into his lumberyard. Standing side by side in the sunlit yard, the veteran craftsman and the tiny builder examine the sturdy wooden frame of a weathered, wheel-bound carriage. The workshop owner points out 2 cheap carriages and mentions a third, slightly pricier option. Staring in absolute awe, the young girl excitedly declares the third carriage to be absolutely perfect. The craftsman explains that the sturdy modified cargo wagon was abandoned because it was simply too massive for practical city use. Her eyes sparkle with pure joy as the owner happily confirms that she can purchase the massive wagon. The burly man rubs his chin and curiously asks how she plans to transport such a heavy vehicle. Stepping forward, she politely requests permission to rent space and perform the modifications right there in the lumberyard. He generously offers her free workspace and tools in exchange for allowing his apprentices to observe her unique methods. The seasoned builder eagerly admits that he desperately wants to witness the incredibly rare house-building skill in action. Walking away from the shop, she silently vows to work hard since the carriage purchase has drained her remaining travel funds. Early the next morning, the tiny adventurer confidently leads her massive draft horse through the city gates. A towering warrior cook waiting by the path breaks into a surprised smile as he greets her. She stares up blankly, reminding the giant that she simply kept her promise from the previous day. The large man admits that his friend Kane specifically asked him to keep a close eye on her safety. His expression darkens as he warns her that local security is failing and that a child was recently kidnapped. Looking back over her shoulder, the concerned girl listens as he reveals that another kidnapped child remains missing. The warrior explains that he is volunteering as a watchman, though she questions why the official guards are not handling it. He casually brushes off her concern, stating that protecting and guiding juniors is a vital duty for high-ranking adventurers. Staring up at him, she suddenly pieces together his true identity as he humbly claims to be between jobs. A sudden flashback reveals other adventurers excitedly referring to the giant as a legendary gold-ranked sword master. She silently marvels at her sheer luck in casually meeting someone who possesses such an incredibly rare advanced skill. Her wide eyes suddenly snap open as she realizes an immediate and embarrassing problem standing before her. Halting her massive horse, she quietly commands the towering warrior to wait for just a second. Gripping the leather saddle tightly, the tiny girl prepares to mount her incredibly tall steed. She grunts with extreme effort, desperately trying to pull her small frame onto the massive animal. The giant warrior stands by silently, watching her embarrassing struggle with wide, bewildered eyes. Blushing fiercely, she angrily shouts that her tiny stature makes jumping onto the horse completely impossible. She bitterly complains that using her rope ladder makes her look like a clinging cicada while he struggles to stifle a laugh. Furious at his muffled chuckling, the embarrassed girl furiously commands her horse to sprint away without him. A heavy, powerful boot suddenly slams into the dirt with explosive force, easily matching the running horse's pace. The smiling warrior smoothly apologizes for laughing at her genuine struggles. She glares down at him with a mixture of extreme annoyance and grudging respect for his terrifying physical prowess. Shifting the conversation, she asks whether his sudden free time means he recently completed a major guild request. Walking alongside her horse, the towering Eve explains that his group recently finished a fierce competition to reach the lowest level of the underground labyrinth. A vivid flashback shows armored warriors battling as he reveals that strict guild rules force clans into a monthly rotation, locking his party out of the deepest floors for another 2 months. Staring ahead from atop her steed, the young girl looks deeply skeptical and questions whether rival adventurers actually honor such blatant collusion. The giant warrior blinks in total confusion, completely unfamiliar with the advanced political term. He quickly clarifies that it is simply an honorable agreement designed to ensure fairness, strictly banning anyone from sneaking ahead of the designated rotation. Absorbing the complex explanation of guild politics, she nods quietly in understanding. The dense, sweeping canopy of the outer forest looms ahead as they venture deeper into the untamed wilderness. Suddenly, a vicious pack of oversized red-eyed rats launches a terrifying surprise attack directly at the giant swordsman. Reacting with explosive speed, Eve casually shatters the lead monster's skull with a single devastating kick. The sheer force of his casual blow sends the remaining beasts flying violently through the air. Completely unfazed by the brutal carnage, the tiny adventurer calmly kneels in the dirt to harvest a fresh medicinal herb. She beams with absolute joy, loudly celebrating the incredible sense of security that his monstrous strength provides. Towering over her, the seasoned warrior sternly warns that wandering this deep into the untamed mountains with only her horse is incredibly reckless. She quickly dismisses his concern, innocently pointing out that Peruchan is perfectly capable of handling the dangerous wilderness. The massive brown steed shoots Aoife a terrifying, venomous glare, prompting the sweating warrior to note that he has severely offended the proud beast. Affectionately stroking her mount's mane, she proudly reveals that Peruchan possesses the legendary bloodline of a dragon horse. Shrugging off the beast's deadly stare, the giant casually reminds her that he can effortlessly crush local monsters with his bare hands. Then, bending down with surprising speed, the tiny girl snatches a surviving giant rat by the throat and boasts about her own impressive grip strength. The vicious rat thrashes helplessly in her unyielding grasp while she stares blankly ahead with terrifying composure. With a sickening, effortless crunch, she snaps the monster's neck and casually lets its lifeless body dangle from her hand. Staring in absolute disbelief at the brutal execution, the giant warrior sweats nervously and admits that she is surprisingly strong. Flashing a radiant, innocent smile, she proudly attributes her lethal strength to a solid core built entirely from carrying heavy construction materials. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, he asks whether her compact size and terrifying physical power are traits inherited from dwarven blood. The tiny girl instantly erupts in fiery rage, fiercely demanding that he stop mocking her short stature. Quickly apologizing to the furious child, he notes her completely human appearance and wonders aloud whether she is a half-blood. Calming down, she explains that her cruel father was entirely human, while her remarkably slender mother may have possessed a trace of dwarven heritage. The towering swordsman smiles down at her with a gentle, deeply understanding warmth. Reaching out with a massive, battle-scarred hand, he affectionately pats her braided hair and agrees that her mixed heritage would explain a lot. Flashing a brilliant fang-filled grin, he shockingly reveals that he is also a half-human who simply claims the title of kitchen warrior to avoid annoying questions. The tiny traveler stares flatly at the giant warrior with a deeply unamused, judgmental glare. She silently questions why this legendary and terrifying swordsman is suddenly acting exactly like a doting, overprotective older cousin. The peaceful, sunlit canopy of the dense forest sways quietly above them as their strange new friendship deepens. Flashing a radiant, closed-eye smile, the tiny adventurer cheerfully celebrates gathering an absolute mountain of fresh herbs. The towering swordsman happily reveals his own massive haul, casually offering her a bloody sack filled with monster tails to use as official extermination proof. His relaxed expression suddenly hardens into a sharp, focused stare as he senses a strange presence nearby. Sensing the unseen disturbance, the massive draft horse immediately perks up its ears and snaps its gaze toward the dense foliage. The young girl nervously asks if a monster is approaching, but the seasoned warrior hesitates, unsure of exactly what is lurking in the shadows. Observing her steed's calm demeanor, she logically deduces that the hidden entity likely is not a dangerous threat. Peering into the thick brush, the giant notes a bizarre fleeing creature that registers as neither human nor MO. A frantic rustling echoes through the quiet forest as the mysterious chase rapidly approaches their position. Catching a faint magical sparkle through the leaves, the young girl gasps in awe and wildly wonders if they have stumbled upon a real fairy. The battle-hardened Kijin sweats nervously, utterly bewildered by her sudden burst of overwhelming excitement. Pumping her tiny fists with fierce determination, she proudly declares her absolute intent to save the mysterious creature while her giant companion stares in confusion. He tries to inject some reason by pointing out that they have not actually identified the entity yet, but she completely ignores his warning. With a massive, fearless smile driven by pure fantasy, the eager child passionately insists that she absolutely must meet a legendary fairy. The young girl thoughtfully recalls the witch explaining that fairies craft top-tier items in exchange for offerings. Realizing that her unique house-building skill could easily satisfy their demands, she grows even more excited. The unlikely trio of adventurer, warrior, and horse stand frozen amid the heavy brush, silently waiting for the mysterious creature to emerge. Her bright eyes widen in utter fascination as the rustling finally stops and she spots the target. Three menacing dark-feathered monsters aggressively surround a tiny white creature trapped desperately within the tangled branches. The grand fairy illusion instantly shatters as the creature lets out a simple chirp, leaving the utterly disappointed girl staring blankly at a perfectly normal little bird. Pointing upward, the giant swordsman asks if the tiny bird was the creature being chased by the monsters. Acknowledging the situation, he instructs the young girl to go rescue the frightened little bird. Stepping forward with a gentle smile, she softly coos and beckons the creature to come down. Trapped high in the thick canopy, the round, long-tailed bird stares down at her with wide, cautious eyes. The warrior notes that wild birds rarely trust humans, prompting her to sadly admit that her approach is not working. Suddenly, the tiny creature's eyes widen with a spark of unexpected intelligence. Flapping its small wings frantically, the fluffy white bird launches itself from the safety of the high branches. With a soft flutter, the creature gracefully lands on a branch right in front of the amazed girl. Her face instantly brightens with joy as she calls the loudly chirping creature absolutely adorable. A moment of profound silence passes as she stares deeply into the bird's unusually expressive eyes. Narrowing her gaze suspiciously, she bluntly asks the creature if it can understand her and whether it is actually a fairy. Sitting quietly on the branch, the mysterious bird responds with a highly suspicious rhythmic chirp. She firmly tells the creature to stop pretending because its unnatural behavior has completely given away its true identity. Startled by her sharp deduction, the tiny bird lets out a squeak of surprise. Holding the bird safely near her massive draft horse, she reassures the fairy that the gentle herbivore will never eat it. Turning back to the towering warrior, she eagerly asks for permission to keep the little creature. The seasoned swordsman confirms that it is indeed a fairy, deducing that it must be a stray since there are no powerful spirits nearby. When she casually insults the fairy's dopey appearance, the warrior chuckles and assures her that fairies are naturally easygoing. Grand narration reveals that fairies are cherished kin to the rare god-serving spirits that seldom manifest in the mortal world. Looking intently at the stray fairy, she warmly offers to take it along since it lacks a guardian spirit. Overjoyed by the generous invitation, the tiny white bird releases a loud, triumphant chirp. Moving with blinding speed, the fairy instantly launches itself directly into the startled girl's chest. Sweating at the creature's alarming lack of caution, she gently holds the bird and admits that she simply cannot abandon it. Nuzzling her cheek against the incredibly fluffy bird, she happily celebrates making her very first fairy friend. The bright, cloud-swept sky stretches peacefully over the sprawling forest canopy. A sudden realization strikes the young adventurer as her eyes snap wide open. Holding the perched fairy close, she curiously asks if her new companion already has a name. Riding smoothly atop her horse, she devises a clever naming game in which she lists different sounds until the fairy chirps at its favorite. They ultimately settle on the name Isa while she absent-mindedly wonders whether magical fairies even possess genders. The deeply offended fairy aggressively pecks her face, forcing the frantic girl to apologize for the rude assumption. Shifting to a serious tone, she asks the one-year-old fairy whether it previously served under a powerful spirit. A tiny, fluffy white bird flutters aimlessly through the open air. Suddenly caught in a powerful gust of wind, the disoriented creature tumbles helplessly out of control. The young girl stares blankly at the clumsy fairy, realizing that he was simply attacked by monsters after being blown completely off course. Chirping excitedly, the little bird listens as she gently asks whether his guardian spirit will eventually come to rescue him. The fairy lets out a solitary, mournful chirp, prompting her to admit that he truly belongs with his magical master. Smiling warmly, she confesses her lifelong dream of speaking with a fairy while wishing they could travel together forever. The energetic fairy happily chirps his agreement as she vows to protect him until his rightful master returns. Days pass quickly as the determined adventurer works relentlessly to fund the construction of her mobile base. Venturing into the forest alongside the towering swordsman, she spends her mornings gathering valuable herbs while her draft horse grazes nearby. As night falls, the diligent builder focuses her remaining energy on meticulously inscribing highly profitable magical papers. With her pockets finally full of hard-earned coins, she prepares to begin the serious construction of her dream carriage. The massive wooden framework of her future mobile home stands proudly inside the bustling lumber workshop. Staring intently at the heavy wooden wheels, the young builder carefully analyzes the complex carriage-undercarriage. Gripping her chin in deep thought, she humbly admits that her knowledge regarding mechanical undercarriages is severely lacking. The seasoned craftsmen enthusiastically praise her rapid learning speed, though she graciously credits their expert advice for her success. Refusing to rely blindly on magic, she methodically disassembles and repairs the carriage parts to fully understand their fundamental mechanics. Leaning over a detailed set of blueprints, the tiny architect carefully reviews her ambitious structural plans with the burly apprentices. Analyzing the design, she plans to keep the living quarters as light as possible while heavily reinforcing the outer walls. She logically deduces that the mobile home must be naturally durable enough to survive brutal monster attacks without constantly relying on magical barriers. As she notes a severe lack of building materials for the upper frame, the burly workshop owner casually steps in to check on her progress. The veteran craftsman generously offers to supply his own premium lumber at a steep discount to support her grand project. Operating as a true team, the skilled laborers constantly share their specialized knowledge and assist one another during their free time. Watching the collaborative craftsmen work, a bright smile spreads across her face as she deeply appreciates the workshop's incredibly supportive environment. Glancing over the neatly organized piles of freshly crafted wooden components, she notes that the primary pieces are finally prepared. With a confident thumbs up, an eager apprentice enthusiastically volunteers to finalize the heavy mechanical undercarriage. She sternly warns the craftsman to watch her closely, admitting that her intense focus causes her to completely lose awareness of her surroundings. Preparing to unleash her unique abilities, she mentally notes that advanced skills rapidly drain her internal magic reserves. Recalling her strict magical training, she resolves to carefully regulate her energy output instead of burning herself out instantly. Her eyes narrow with absolute, unyielding focus as she actively channels her latent energy. A powerful aura of pure determination radiates from the young builder as she firmly establishes the concept of a true home within her mind. The magical skill surges through her veins, instantly granting her the innate knowledge of exactly which tool to wield. Moving with blinding precision, the tiny architect flawlessly slots a massive wooden panel into the carriage frame. Nina's house-building skill activates, allowing her to instantly calculate the precise measurements needed to trim the reinforcement planks. The apprentices watch in stunned silence as the young girl moves with blinding speed to modify the wood. Describing her mysterious power, she feels as though an ethereal double is working alongside her to complete complex tasks on her own. Exerting incredible physical force, the tiny builder easily hoists and holds heavy structural supports during assembly. With a final determined sigh, she successfully reinforces the massive undercarriage without needing any assistance. The sheer overwhelming potential of the house-building skill stands fully revealed within the workshop yard. Looking toward the veteran craftsman with beads of sweat on her brow, she politely asks if the work is acceptable. The workshop boys marvel at how the entire reinforcement process was completed in a mere instant. They praise her incredible precision and admit they were too busy trying to keep up with her rapid movements. The master craftsman examines the completed will section and wonders if her ability is superior to specialized carpentry skills. He calls the feat amazing, noting that attaching 3-meter planks alone is something even expert carpenters cannot achieve. Crowding around the young traveler, the apprentices pepper her with questions about her skill's duration and focus. The workshop owner puts an end to the interrogation, telling his staff to stop pestering her and instead follow her example. Nina expresses her sincere gratitude, noting that working in such a lively shop has been both fun and educational. Shifting her focus to the future, she vows to save up even more money to complete the carriage's upper structure. Eve approaches her near the city wall, suggesting they find a good place to eat now that their deliveries are done. Her face lights up instantly as she agrees to join the hungry warrior for his treat. Humming a cheerful tune, she follows the giant toward the city center while dreaming of a massive feast. Eve mentions that their destination was established by a branch of the Neon Group and guarantees that the food tastes great. Nina pauses for a heartbeat, her expression turning serious as she contemplates the name of the establishment. Looking down, she repeats the words Neon Group as if confirming a long-held suspicion. The warrior explains that they are also known as the Neon Tribe and asks whether she has ever encountered them. She admits that she has only heard distant rumors about the group. As they continue their walk through the streets, she stares ahead with a mixture of curiosity and caution, repeating the name of the Neon Tribe one last time. Grand narration reveals that individuals reincarnated with memories of their past lives are known in this world as the Neon Tribe, largely because most of them originate from Japan. A vivid flashback to her previous life shows her standing near a train station just before the final train arrived. Recalling the exact moment a mysterious line sliced through her body, she stares into the distance and thoughtfully speculates that the others struck by that same line may have also died and reincarnated here alongside her. Historical records explain that while the Neon Tribe was initially welcomed for their revolutionary ideas, their increasingly extreme actions eventually caused society to view them as bizarre and dangerous. Looking down with a heavy heart, she silently admits that this dark history is the exact reason she could never reveal her reincarnated memories to anyone. She firmly resolves to keep her secret forever, knowing there is absolutely no benefit in exposing herself and risking involvement in strange and dangerous conflicts. A massive steaming bowl of food is carefully set down onto a wooden table with a soft thud. The restaurant owner serves the fresh dishes while the giant warrior enthusiastically urges the young girl to try the familiar-looking food. A mouth-watering spread of classic Japanese cuisine, including nikujaga, stir-fried vegetables, and katsudon, rests invitingly on the table. Her eyes widen in absolute, tearful disbelief as she stares dumbfounded at the impossible feast. Eve cheerfully explains that the Neon Group popularized rice cultivation, making the stable grain widely available in almost every town. Her expression darkens as she silently notes that his optimistic claim is completely false when it comes to the harsh remote frontiers she recently traveled through. Dark memories surface of her desperate struggle for survival on the road, where she was forced to bake ground-up dried plants just to stave off starvation. With trembling hands, the overwhelmed child finally snaps her chopsticks apart and takes a hesitant bite of the juicy meat. A small, profoundly contented smile slowly spreads across her lips as the incredible flavor washes over her senses. Heavy tears instantly stream down her flushed face as she loudly wails about how unbelievably delicious the meal tastes. The giant swordsman and the restaurant owner completely freeze in panicked confusion at her sudden, dramatic outburst. Still crying uncontrollably, she passionately explains that she has never tasted such rich, tender, and juicy meat in this unforgiving fantasy world. Eve frantically tries to calm the sobbing girl while she continues to blubber helplessly over the absolute perfection of the food. The relieved owner warmly smiles and declares that the meal is completely on the house, leaving the confused warrior to point out that he had not even ordered it. Flashing a proud grin, the cook explains that his boss strictly taught him to properly reward any customer who genuinely cries over how good their food is. Sniffling softly, the deeply moved adventurer bows her head and profusely thanks the generous man for the incredible meal. Her tears immediately vanish as she happily stuffs her cheeks to the brim with the sweet and savory feast. The towering warrior watches in utter dismay as she ruthlessly devours the entire spread, nervously asking what happened to his promised share. Waving them off with a friendly smile, the owner promises to throw in a little something extra the next time they visit his restaurant. Walking peacefully back to the inn beneath the evening sky, she sheepishly apologizes to Eve for her sudden crying fit. Flashing a radiant smile at her pet fairy, she playfully points out that the tiny bird miraculously managed to eat its entire portion as well. The towering swordsman's relaxed demeanor suddenly vanishes, replaced by a highly serious and contemplative stare. Looking ahead solemnly, he reveals that members of the legendary Neon Group will soon arrive in the city for the upcoming Pyrini campaign. Glancing down at her, he admits that he brought her to the restaurant specifically to help her warm up to the highly feared group. Looking away with a deeply skeptical glare, she points out the terrifying rumors that the tribe joins wars completely on a whim, which Eve hesitantly confirms. The seasoned warrior thoughtfully concludes that much of the public fear is born from pure jealousy over the tribe's unimaginable and incredibly powerful skills. The towering swordsman praises the Neon tribe, noting that despite their controversial reputation, they create amazing things like the meal they just enjoyed. The young adventurer stares up in quiet contemplation as she absorbs his unexpected praise for her fellow reincarnates. Eve playfully teases her for crying over the delicious food, prompting her to flush with intense embarrassment and demand that Eve forget it immediately. The weary duo finally arrive back at the Spirit's Perch Inn, where the cheerful innkeeper and her son are sweeping the entrance. The friendly family warmly welcomes the little traveler back, and she happily announces her return to her temporary home. Turning to the innkeeper, the highly protective swordsman politely asks her to keep a close eye on his tiny companion. Flashing a gentle, reassuring smile, the giant warrior tells her to get some proper rest before waving a friendly goodbye. The madam watches him leave and playfully remarks that he is a very good man, though sadly a bit too old for the little miss. Chris laughs awkwardly, silently thinking that a grown man making a move on a literal child would be completely messed up. Walking inside, the young reincarnate feels a profound sense of relief knowing that her giant friend does not harbor any ill will toward the Neon tribe. Crossing her arms with a sigh, she affectionately dismisses his open-mindedness as a natural byproduct of his simple, muscle-brain nature. The next morning, the tiny adventurer heads straight to the bustling Western District Guild branch to secure her mandatory general request. She glances around the crowded wooden hall in slight confusion, surprised to find that her towering companion is nowhere to be seen today. Her confusion deepens as she stares blankly at the request board, realizing that every single herb-gathering job has completely vanished. A smug bronze-ranked adventurer suddenly steps in front of her, proudly waving a thick stack of claimed herb-gathering forms. The little girl glares up at the arrogant man with an intensely unimpressed deadpan expression. He sneers down at her jealously, pointing out that she has been hogging all the easy gathering jobs recently. Grabbing his official bronze tag, the petty man vehemently refuses to let a tiny child rank up before he does. He aggressively warns her not to get cocky just because she happens to have a legendary kitchen sword master protecting her. Completely ignoring his pathetic jealous rant, the tiny adventurer simply turns her back and walks away. She internally grumbles about his terrible attitude but logically accepts that guild requests are strictly first come, first served. The elegant receptionist suddenly calls out from behind the counter, snapping the young girl out of her annoyance and offering to help. Leaning over the desk with a friendly smile, the clerk presents her with a special alternative work request to fulfill her quota. The tiny worker examines the strange document, bewildered by the bizarre prospect of polishing the inside of a giant agate tortoiseshell. The clerk explains that the task requires both delicate precision and surprising physical strength, perfectly matching her unique capabilities. Driven by the hope of securing discounted carriage materials from the monster shop, the eager builder instantly accepts the labor-intensive job. Arriving at the busy monster materials shop, the tiny adventurer respectfully presents her official request form to the exhausted owner. The weary, sweating shopkeeper sighs in profound relief, immensely grateful for any extra hands to help with the brutal workload. He nervously explains that a massive unexpected order has just arrived with a brutally tight 7-day delivery deadline. In the gloomy background, the shop's apprentices sit completely drained of life, their souls practically escaping their exhausted bodies. Noticing the dead-tired crew, the young girl kindly volunteers to handle the heavy shell stripping process herself despite the owner's skepticism. To prove her monstrous physical power to the doubting craftsman, she casually asks for a sturdy stone or a piece of hardwood to smash. The tiny adventurer confidently snaps a thick piece of wood completely in half with her bare hands. The exhausted craftsmen stare in utter disbelief at the sheer physical power displayed by the little girl. Wasting no time, she steps up to the workbench and effortlessly lifts the massive agate tortoiseshell. Gripping her heavy tools, the tiny builder rapidly chisels away at the tough outer layer with terrifying speed. Her hands become a blur as she flawlessly strips the heavy shell apart with surgical precision. Sweating nervously, the shop owner loudly points out that the little miss is shockingly faster and far more precise than his own seasoned crew. The dumbfounded apprentices gather around, watching in absolute awe as she tirelessly hammers away at the stubborn monster material. Shards of shell fly through the air as she relentlessly breaks down the incredibly dense material. The desperate apprentices swarm her, eagerly begging the boss to raise her pay and pleading for her to return the next afternoon. Sweat dropping at their intense desperation, she realizes that she absolutely cannot turn down the lucrative job and decides to postpone her trip to the lumber mill. The frantic shop owner immediately offers to handle her errands and buy her lunch just to keep her working on the massive order. The rejuvenated boss rallies his exhausted crew, strategically assigning all the heavy stripping work to Chris while the men focus entirely on polishing. The workers nod with renewed determination and immediately grab the newly stripped shells to begin their delicate polishing work. Settling into a fierce rhythm, the young adventurer relentlessly hammers through the towering pile of heavy tortoise shells. She lets out a heavy sigh of exhaustion after finally clearing the massive mountain of monster materials. Staring proudly at the sparkling pile of finished pieces, she cheerfully announces that the brutal shell removal process is officially complete. Meanwhile, the heavily overworked apprentices completely collapse, groaning miserably that their entire bodies are numb from the grueling labor. Noticing that the entire crew has reached its physical limit, a brilliant idea suddenly flashes through the clever girl's mind. She eagerly offers to brew a batch of soothing cold compresses, proudly revealing that a village which taught her the secret recipe. The shopkeeper's wife watches in sheer amazement as the little girl draws fresh well water to begin her makeshift medical preparations. Flashing a confident smile, the young traveler assures the woman that the simplified medicinal recipe requires absolutely no magical healing skills. Demonstrating her vast survival knowledge, she efficiently crushes fresh mint leaves directly into a wooden bucket filled with freezing well water. She skillfully blends the infused mint water with rich horse fat to create a thick, cooling medicinal paste. Spreading the soothing mixture evenly across clean cloth, she successfully finishes crafting the highly effective cold compresses. She humbly notes that the mixture only treats basic muscle pain. While the amazed shop owners marvel at the simplicity of the process, the weary craftsmen apply the refreshing patches to their sore shoulders and instantly groan in pure bliss as the cooling mint soothes their aching muscles. Grand narration reveals that the revitalized crew successfully met the impossible deadline after 3 brutal days of non-stop labor. During the lively post-job celebration, the shop owner blinks in surprise when the tiny builder eagerly asks to purchase damaged monster wings. She explains that pristine rainbow hopper wings are far too expensive for her budget. Hoping to acquire broken pieces for her carriage project, the generous boss immediately stops her, loudly insisting that she should have mentioned her need for the rare materials much earlier. He casually hands her a massive bag filled with glittering, glass-like wings while she nervously asks whether they are too valuable to give away. Smiling warmly alongside his wife, the owner insists that she take the damaged goods since they were destined for the garbage pile anyway. Her face lights up with absolute joy as she graciously accepts the materials, instantly dreaming up incredible modifications for her mobile home. The entire Monster Shop crew smiles warmly at the energetic child, incredibly grateful for her monumental effort in saving their business. Late that night, thick storm clouds ominously gather above the quiet cobblestone streets of the labyrinth city. The young adventurer walks alone through the darkened alleyways, happily humming as she hauls a heavy wooden box filled with rare materials. Her mind races with brilliant architectural ideas, specifically planning to piece the vibrant monster shards together into a beautiful stained glass window. Her cheerful plotting comes to an abrupt and terrifying halt as she suddenly senses a heavy, malicious presence lurking nearby. Glancing nervously over her shoulder, the tiny traveler realizes that a sinister hooded figure is silently trailing her through the dark shadows. Eve's grave warning brutally echoes in her mind, reminding her that a vicious kidnapper has been actively hunting children throughout the city. Breaking into a cold sweat, the terrified girl clutches her heavy supply box tightly as the horrifying reality of being stalked finally sets in. The young girl stands tensely in the shadows, entirely unaware of the ominous cloaked figure looming directly behind her. Stepping silently across the rough stone floor, the mysterious stranger rapidly closes the distance to the unsuspecting traveler. Narrowing her eyes with sudden suspicion, she senses the creeping danger and hardens her expression. Reluctantly drawing a piece of magical paper, she mutters that it is a massive waste to use it here, but she leaves herself no other choice. Gripping the glowing talisman firmly, she shouts the activation phrase for a powerful defensive spell. A radiant aura bursts from her hand, instantly enveloping her in a shimmering shield of magical light. She notes that while normal magical paper glows brightly for everyone to see, the unique patterns crafted by Witch-sama remain entirely invisible to outsiders. Recalling her grueling training, she admits that memorizing Witch-sama's custom characters alongside standard magic was incredibly difficult, but undeniably useful. Fully protected by her invisible barrier, the tiny adventurer boldly strides right past the towering figure without a single flinch. Shooting a sharp glare over her shoulder, she fearlessly challenges the stalker to hurry up and attack if that is their true intention. The shadowy stranger freezes in place, completely caught off guard by the little girl's bold intimidation. Her tough facade instantly crumbles into sheer panic as a familiar voice suddenly calls out her name from the darkness. Stepping into the faint light, a young boy wearing suspenders offers her a warm and completely innocent smile. Utterly bewildered by the sudden appearance, the tiny adventurer stammers out Loki's name in pure disbelief. The boy casually explains that he and his mother were worried about her late return, prompting him to come out and look for her. Her intense anxiety melts into a soft, relieved smile as she gratefully thanks him for his concern. Walking safely side by side beneath the warm glow of a lantern, she cheerfully explains that she was delayed by a client's lively after-party. Glancing cautiously over her shoulder, she quietly notes that the sinister presence from earlier has completely vanished into the night. Staring into the empty, mist-filled alleyway, a lingering sense of dread leaves her wondering what exactly had been stalking her. Later that night, she gazes in absolute wonder at a breathtaking collection of smoothly polished, glowing stones scattered across her desk. Sitting comfortably in her room, she gently asks her tiny bird companion whether he shares her deep appreciation for beautiful things. A sudden realization strikes her as she cheerfully promises to build a proper little house for her feathered friend as well. As the little bird chirps a joyful melody, she eagerly asks whether he wants to decorate his future home with glowing stones. Organizing her new treasures, she decides to temporarily stash the beautiful stones in her storage pouch while sorting them by size and color. Frowning slightly at the growing pile, she nervously realizes that her trusty storage pouch might be nearing its maximum capacity. The tiny bird tilts its head in pure curiosity, staring blankly at the strange starry void hidden within the magical bag. Reaching into the glowing spatial tear, she proudly explains that Witch-sama enchanted the pouch so that no one else can see its true contents. Resting her head on her folded arms, she nostalgically recalls how incredibly vast and amazing her old friend's storage pouch used to be. She notes that despite its plain exterior, Eve's incredible magical bag could easily hold the entire volume of a massive mansion in the central district. Recalling the absurd economics of such an item, she correctly guesses that a top-tier storage pouch must cost upward of 10,000 gold coins. A vivid memory surfaces of a towering, heavily armored man recoiling in absolute shock upon hearing that astronomical price tag. With a completely deadpan expression, the tiny adventurer bluntly points out that someone could simply buy a luxurious mansion with that staggering amount of money. Staring fondly at her battered leather satchel, she acknowledges that even this humble hand-me-down from Witch-sama would cost a small fortune to replace. She explains that her trusty bag can hold roughly 2 entire warehouses worth of goods, but it constantly threatens to overflow if she forgets to reorganize it. Glancing over her depleted stationery supplies, she realizes that she desperately needs to restock her ink and wistfully adds a fancy new fountain pen to her shopping list. Examining her ink pen, the young traveler notes that its lines are too thick for small magical papers while her bird companion rests atop her head. Stretching her arms high, she cheerfully declares that it is time to craft a little more magic. Outside the stone walls of the Adventurers Guild, a new day begins. Staring at the wooden bulletin board, she is surprised to find a herb gathering request still available. A concerned receptionist gently suggests that Christian avoid going outside the city today. She explains that Eve was urgently called away into the dangerous labyrinth by the main office. Recalling his previous visit, the receptionist mentions that Eve was deeply worried about her traveling alone, though he felt relieved when she accepted a request within the city walls. Because she finished her tasks earlier than expected, her protective friend still has not returned. The receptionist admits that she is highly concerned about the recent kidnapping incidents, but is even more worried about a particular adventurer from before. Realizing exactly who she means, the tiny traveler recalls the man who had been unnecessarily hostile toward her. A bitter memory surfaces of the angry adventurer screaming that she had stolen all the gathering requests before he could complete his own. The clerk adds that the menacing man spent the next day staring intensely at the request board as if hunting for a specific target. To the receptionist's absolute horror, the brave little girl boldly declares that she is willing to become bait. She calmly deduces that the perfect opportunity for him to attack would be while she is isolated in the forest gathering herbs. Panicking, the receptionist begs her to wait for Eve to return so they can safely catch the stalker together. Suddenly, a desperate male guild worker interrupts and begs Chris to take on his gathering request as well. Sweating nervously, he explains that requests are piling up because the usual gatherers are busy with other jobs. He heavily relies on her well-known accuracy and carefulness to properly secure the needed herbs. Beaming with confidence, she promises that she will be completely fine with Peru-chan and Isa by her side, noting that she has even prepared a backup plan. Reluctantly accepting her decision, the receptionist strictly warns her to run away immediately if things become too dangerous. Dark, towering evergreens loom ominously over the quiet wilderness. Deep within the shadows of the woods, Chris kneels to harvest herbs while her massive steed grazes peacefully nearby. Sensing hostile presences, she shoots a fierce glare into the brush and challenges her attackers to come out of hiding. Peru-chan sharply raises his head, his ears twitching as he detects the approaching danger. Noticing her mount's sudden alertness, she quickly calls out his name. Her eyes widen slightly as the hidden ambushers finally reveal themselves. Bursting aggressively through the foliage, the scarred adventurer from the guild appears alongside 2 nervous accomplices. The vengeful leader clicks his tongue in deep frustration at being discovered so easily. Realizing that their stealth approach has failed, he frantically orders one of his confused lackeys to deal with the giant horse. Flashing a wicked grin, the scarred leader sneers that he has some serious business to settle with the little runt. Standing her ground, the fearless girl retorts that she has a few choice words for him as well. Without a second of hesitation, she commands Peru-chan to attack as the massive horse leaps into action. The giant beast charges forward with terrifying momentum, completely dwarfing the panicked thugs. The 2 lackeys freeze in pure, paralyzing terror as the monstrous steed bears down on them. Peru-chan aggressively stomps his powerful hooves into the dirt, violently shutting down the ambush before it can even begin. A terrifying shadow looms over the panicked men as the massive horse rears up to protect its master. Peru-chan's fierce glare paralyzes the thugs, his eyes promising absolute destruction to anyone who dares harm Chris. One of the accomplices falls backward into the dirt, groaning in sheer terror at the beast's overwhelming presence. Scrambling away in pure panic, the thug screams that nobody warned him they would be fighting a monster instead of a normal horse. Terrified out of his mind, the coward loudly abandons the mission and flees for his life into the woods. Watching his men run away, the scarred leader angrily curses them for being completely useless cowards. Observing their pathetic retreat, Chris calmly deduces that the accomplices were merely cheap street punks rather than real adventurers. The vengeful leader turns his attention back to the tiny traveler, who stands completely unfazed amidst the brush. Hiding behind a bush, she quickly formulates a plan, debating whether to use her magical paper to launch a surprise attack. Suddenly, her tiny bird companion chirps loudly and takes flight from her shoulder. Flying aggressively straight into the leader's face, the brave little bird completely catches the scarred man off guard. Narrowing her eyes with intense focus, the young adventurer spots the perfect opening to strike. The distracted thug swats wildly at the fluttering bird, furiously demanding to know what the hell is attacking him. Seizing the moment, Chris violently dashes forward with incredible explosive speed. Leaping high into the air, the tiny girl delivers a devastating flying headbutt directly into the massive man's stomach. The crushing impact instantly knocks the wind out of the scarred leader. He crumples heavily to his knees, gasping desperately for air as the sudden blow paralyzes him. Standing over her gasping foe, Chris pulls out a heavy frying pan and declares his actions completely unforgivable. Calling him a perverted freak, she ruthlessly smashes the solid iron pan directly into his skull. Continuing her fierce assault, she aggressively screams at him for daring to gang up on a little girl. The battered thug collapses heavily onto the dirt path, completely knocked unconscious by the brutal beating. Brushing off her hands, the tiny adventurer lets out a satisfied sigh as she stands victorious over her defeated stalker. Having firmly tied the unconscious criminal's hands behind his back, she confidently notes that he is finally secure. Looking at her loyal steed, she frowns in deep disgust, hating the idea of making Peruchan carry such human garbage back to the city. Shaking her head, she firmly rejects the idea of making Isa carry him either, leaving her to carefully ponder how to transport the captive. Riding atop her massive steed, the young adventurer effortlessly drags the securely bound thug back towards civilization on a makeshift sled. The weary traveler finally arrives at the towering stone gates of the city, where armed guards stand watch over the entrance. Her eyes widen in absolute shock as she loudly demands to know why the city guards refuse to arrest her attacker. The stoic guard calmly explains that because the criminal is a local citizen and she is merely a foreigner, the security force will not take him into custody. A wave of sheer disbelief washes over the young girl's face as the harsh reality of the city's biased laws sinks in. Left with no other viable options, she reluctantly drags her captive to the Adventurers Guild headquarters to handle the matter internally. Clenching her fists in furious indignation, she vents her frustration over the guild's refusal to issue a meaningful punishment simply because she prevented the crime before it could happen. Despite receiving monetary compensation, she bitterly complains to the receptionist that the guild is clearly covering up one of its own members' gross misconduct. Her anger boils over as she realizes that merely demoting the criminal from copper rank to iron rank falls completely short of true justice. The narrative reveals that the arrogant thug, Guys, receives a pathetic 10-day forced labor sentence and conveniently claims ignorance regarding his attempted ambush. Lowering her gaze in deep disappointment, the tiny adventurer silently accepts that the dangerous situation has not truly been resolved. Brushing off the receptionist's lingering concerns, she boldly declares that she will finish her remaining requests while her attacker is locked away performing forced labor. Walking away, she mentally resolves to remain on high alert in case the two cowardly accomplices decide to return for revenge. Wasting no time taking precautions, she immediately draws a specialized talisman and activates a powerful defensive spell. A brilliant, shimmering barrier of protective magical energy instantly bursts forth, completely enveloping both her and her belongings. Flashing a warm, confident smile at her loyal bird and massive steed, she happily reminds herself that she is never truly fighting alone. The tiny adventurer sits quietly in a wooden chair, her expression a mixture of guilt and apprehension. Across from her, a scarred, armored adventurer stands with his arms crossed, staring down at her with intense disapproval. Eve firmly scolds her for recklessly using herself as bait, though Chris tries to justify her actions by claiming she hates being secretly followed and felt confident she could defeat Geis. Admitting her carelessness with a frustrated groan, she acknowledges her mistake as Eve points out that two of Geis' accomplices managed to escape entirely. A heavy silence hangs in the air as Eve averts his gaze, clearly burdened by his own thoughts. Surprising her, Eve reveals that he was invited to join an elite team tackling the underground labyrinth after they forced the guild to make a rare exception. Caught off guard, the young girl realizes he was deeply worried about leaving her behind, though Eve admits he is still hesitant to accept the dangerous offer. Reassuring him with a confident smile, she explains her plan to remain within the city walls, noting that the escaped thugs would not dare attack her in broad daylight. She gently urges the gold-ranked adventurer to be careful out there, playfully admitting how strange it feels to offer advice to someone so experienced. Pondering her immediate future, she quickly realizes that staying inside the city presents a massive problem when it comes to giving Peruchan his much-needed exercise. Later, the young traveler gazes in absolute wonder at a meticulously crafted circular window. Inside a bustling workshop, a cheerful craftsman holds up the architectural blueprints and asks her exactly where she wants the stunning new window installed. As a crowd of curious workers gathers around, she smoothly suggests building a custom shelf directly beneath the round window. Raising her finger excitedly, she adds that installing another window directly above the bedroom would be a dreamy way to fall asleep beneath the stars. Her excitement instantly fizzles as she nervously imagines terrifying monsters lurking right above her while she sleeps. The surrounding craftsmen burst into uproarious laughter at her wildly vivid imagination. Patting her head affectionately, the head craftsman reassures the blushing girl that her massive horse would easily detect any monsters long before they got close. Looking over the scattered supplies, he confidently announces that all the required materials, including her special magic steel order, are finally ready. Clenching her fists with nervous excitement, the tiny adventurer prepares to finally begin the actual construction of her mobile home. Taking a deep breath, a profound sense of awe washes over her as she realizes she is truly building her very own house. Securing her tool belt, she outlines her ambitious plan to erect the sidewalls before finishing the floorboards and ceiling all at once. Dropping to her knees, she skillfully hammers nails into the thick wooden floorboards with practiced precision. Moving swiftly along the arched roof structure, she securely pounds each plank into place to seal the ceiling. Her rhythmic hammering suddenly pauses as she notices something unexpected within the framework. Two astounded apprentices watch in awe, realizing that the little girl flawlessly corrected their poorly crafted wooden planks with just a single glance. Humming a cheerful tune, she carefully lifts the beautiful stained glass window and smoothly installs it into the prepared wooden frame. Stepping back to admire her handiwork, she proudly notes the newly attached doors and perfectly fitted built-in cabinets. Grabbing her mallet, she begins modifying a cheap coachman's seat to create seamless access into the main living space. Stepping inside the surprisingly spacious cabin, she happily declares that the entire first-floor interior is officially complete. Moving efficiently toward the back, she establishes the area beneath the bed as a dedicated storage space before turning her attention to the upper level. Looking over the cozy sleeping quarters, she decides to construct a small table so she can comfortably work right from bed. Reaching up to inspect the roof, she strategically avoids placing the emergency escape window directly over the bed, just to be safe. Working underneath the carriage chassis, she diligently installs a lightweight magic steel container designed to function as a mobile bath. Turning to the opposite side of the cabin, she proudly fits a compact sink to serve as her functional kitchen area. Grabbing a large brush, she meticulously paints the exterior walls, her eyes sparkling with pure satisfaction as the project nears completion. The tiny adventurer stands silently before the towering multi-tiered carriage, taking in the full majesty of her completed masterpiece. Her bright eyes widen with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment as she stares at her finished home. The workshop crew gathers behind her in absolute disbelief, stunned that the little girl perfectly assembled the highly polished carriage in merely half a day. The head craftsman beams with pride and warmly congratulates her on a spectacular job. Intervening with a stern look, the landlady scolds the men and insists that they let the exhausted Chris rest. The head craftsman cheerfully promises a celebratory feast, prompting the eager workers to scramble back to their duties. Taking a quiet seat on a wooden stool, the weary girl watches her bird flutter joyfully around the newly built carriage. Smiling softly at her feathered companion, she marvels at how incredible it feels to finally see her dream realized. Gazing at the sturdy wooden table and neat cabinets, she acknowledges that while it is small and mounted on wheels, it is perfect. A profound sense of peace washes over her as she whispers that she finally possesses a home of her very own. Memories of her past life suddenly surface, reminding her of a suffocating existence in which her parents dictated everything from her college education to her career, ultimately leading to a hollow engagement with a coworker. A dark shadow falls across her expression as she recalls the crushing moment her fiancé cheated on her, completely shattering the carefully managed life others had chosen for her. Remembering her tragic end just as she resolved to buy her own apartment and live on her own terms, she reflects on the sudden death of Nina Karisu. Staring up at the polished wooden walls, she fiercely cherishes this carriage as the very first thing she truly chose and earned for herself. Closing her eyes with a contented smile, the young traveler fully embraces this tiny wooden fortress as the one place where she truly belongs. Sitting comfortably on her bed, the tiny adventurer hums a cheerful melody while reflecting on how much fun yesterday's party was. Her smile fades slightly as she realizes she cannot keep her house carriage parked there indefinitely, especially considering her remaining debt and Gowry's continued generosity. Turning her attention to her loyal bird, she cheerfully suggests that since her own house is finished, it is time to build one for him as well. Gathering her materials, she decides to avoid metal entirely, opting instead for thin vines, wood chips, straw, and cotton. As Isa chirps excitedly, refusing to settle for a plain box, the young traveler resolves to craft a magnificent birdhouse that will truly lift her companion's spirits. Closing her eyes to focus, she takes a deep breath and immediately gets to work on her new project. After a burst of creative energy, she proudly presents the intricately woven multi-story birdhouse to her completely awestruck companion. Pointing out the design features, she explains that the extra-wide entrance ensures he will never bump his wings while flying inside. She gestures toward the towering structure, detailing how the interior is cleverly divided into separate floors. Highlighting the top level, she describes it as a dedicated living room and play area perfectly suited for relaxation. She demonstrates the miniature functional window, showing how pulling the strings adjusts the tiny curtains, and notes that the second floor serves as a dining space. Moving down to the third floor near the entrance, she proudly reveals a miniature exercise wheel she installed just for him. She describes the fourth floor as his personal creative space, leaving extra straw and cotton so he can build a custom bed. Finally, she points to the concealed bottom floor housing his water bowl and bathroom, assuring him that the hidden clean-out door ensures complete privacy. The little bird's eyes sparkle like stars as he stares at his luxurious new residence in pure amazement. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Isa bursts into a beautiful melodic song to thank his master. With a joyful chirp, the tiny bird immediately takes flight to explore his incredible new home. Chris watches in sheer amusement as the eager bird wastes no time moving his belongings into the woven structure. She marvels at his surprising dedication as he flutters back and forth, transferring his entire hidden collection. Examining the tiny hoard, she notes that his strange treasures consist of crunchy dried fruit, round pebbles, and even an empty insect shell. When she casually offers to help him carry a heavy pebble, the little bird freezes in absolute panic as the rock slips from his grasp. A sudden knock interrupts their playful morning, prompting Chris to peek outside and greet Loki at her door. The young boy explains that an official from the Adventurers Guild stopped by specifically to pass along a message for her. To Chris's absolute confusion, Loki reveals that the guild headquarters has urgently requested her presence for a meeting. An anxious official waits impatiently for Chris to arrive at the guild headquarters. With a look of pure desperation, he grabs the girl and begs for her immediate help. He reveals that the guild is in dire need of a massive and diverse supply of magical paper. When Chris suggests turning to the Magic Guild, he explains that their only inscriber has already run off. Chris asks why others cannot simply learn the required patterns from an official manual. He admits that the Magic Guild is sabotaging them and that they lack the talent needed to draw such complex patterns. The official suspects that the other guild is hiking prices to recover lost profits from past orders. Looking at her with trust, he admits that she is the only person they can rely on for this task. Chris feels the intense pressure of being the sole solution for such a critical mission. She agrees to accept the urgent request, depending on which specific patterns are needed. A lucrative deal is struck for 8 gold coins per high-tier sheet, plus taxes and a bonus. Both Chris and the official share a sinister grin as they realize how much money is at stake. Their landlady watches from a distance, noting how creepy their synchronized laughter has become. He hands over a thick manual containing all the required patterns and the reason behind the request. Chris is startled to discover that the massive order is actually for the legendary Neon Tribe. She learns that the guild's top talents, including Eve, have been drafted to explore deeper levels of the labyrinth. The man is surprised to learn that Chris and the high-ranked adventurer are already close acquaintances. He mentions that most of the recent kidnapping cases have unfortunately targeted the Western District. Chris confirms the danger by revealing that she was nearly attacked in the forest just the other day. He is horrified to hear that the security force refused to take her case seriously because she is an outsider. Infuriated by the bias, the official declares that the guild will handle the criminal matter on its own terms. He promises to add an exclusive semi-citizen clause to her contract to ensure she receives full legal protection. Overjoyed by his sudden kindness, the young girl thanks him profusely for looking out for her. They agree to add a clause stating that the contract will expire once the Magic Guild offers fair pricing. Chris wisely insists on another clause allowing her to terminate the agreement whenever she wishes. He agrees to her sensible terms, acknowledging that it would be difficult to ask her to stay after such an ordeal. Their discussion turns to how the divide between citizens and outsiders in Geralt is steadily worsening. Because the city's income from the labyrinth continues to rise, officials see no need to increase the citizen population. He recalls past immigration troubles and mentions rumors that the city may soon declare independence. They both recognize that adventurers are vital to the city's prosperity despite being treated like outsiders. It is noted that almost all of the warriors challenging the lowest levels are actually adventurers from outside the city. Chris realizes that she will be holed up in her room for quite some time producing the required magical paper. The man offers to find a safe location for her carriage while she is busy with her work. A woman suggests moving into a guild partnered in where Peru-chan will have plenty of room to exercise. The official confirms that the guild will fully cover her lodging costs as part of the agreement. Chris politely declines the offer, fearing she will grow too accustomed to luxury and wanting to remain at her current inn. They suggest a compromise in which the guild cares for Peru in exchange for allowing him to help with riding lessons. Chris is amazed to hear that the guild actually possesses purebred dragon horses for training purposes. He tells the story of how the mayor secured a male dragon horse during his youth and used it to build the city's fortune. He explains that dragon horses are blessed by dragons and notes that Peru shares their unique lineage. The offspring of these noble beasts are bred as prestigious rewards for nobles and distinguished adventurers. These heavy breed mounts are perfect for adventurers because they can endure harsh conditions and carry enormous loads. Chris agrees to the arrangement after being assured that a professional trainer will supervise Peru's exercise. She asks the official to take good care of her beloved horse while they are apart. Peru wears a resigned expression that seems to say he is perfectly fine with the temporary arrangement. Chris tells Isa not to worry about her because she is not a fragile child. She tells the bird to behave himself as they prepare to return to their work. The sun shines brightly over the stone buildings of the prosperous labyrinth city. The mission briefing reveals that a swarm of illusion lizards is causing havoc on the lowest levels of the labyrinth. These monsters use mental attacks to cast illusions, making Chris's specialized imitation patterns the party's only hope. Swordmasters handle physical threats, while mages utilize mirrors to reflect mental attacks and gradually whittle down the swarm. The massive number of monsters suggests that an alpha illusion lizard is likely acting as the floor boss. The party coordinates a plan to utilize an absolute barrier and imitation magic to wipe out the enemies. Chris points out that a vacuum spell might be more effective since the monsters survive on ambient magical energy. Proposing a faster solution, she suggests that magic suppression would be more efficient and help avoid further guild drama. She calculates her rewards, realizing that she can finally pay off her house carriage debt and leave Geralt forever. Chris hums a cheerful tune while dreaming about the freedom of traveling in her mobile home. Sitting at her desk, the young adventurer asks her loyal bird companion, Isa, for a quick favor. She wonders if they could ask the senior fairies for assistance with more precise and delicate drafting. Chris explains that human-made fountain pens always have nibs that are slightly too thick for her needs. Isa chirps excitedly as Chris presents a list of complex characters required for the new high-tier paper. The brave little bird lets out a determined cry, ready to use his connections to help his master. Noticing a rustle inside the woven birdhouse, Chris watches as her feathered friend prepares for his task. Isa suddenly takes flight with a piece of magical paper, leaving Chris startled by his immediate departure. The bird confidently chirps that he will be perfectly fine since he has the specialized paper she provided. Isa's personal magical paper is a unique cloth paper blend that remains functional even when tightly rolled up. Chris leans out the window and tells her small friend not to push himself too hard on his journey. She watches quietly as the tiny bird flies into the vast sky and disappears into the distance. Feeling lonely without her companions, Chris regrets not asking exactly when Peru-chan or Isa would be back. Resolving to stay busy, she returns to her drawing work to pass the time until their return. A man named Watts arrives at the door, cheerfully announcing that he has come to pick up the completed sheets. He explains that he was sent instead of Anna because carrying valuable magical paper is considered too risky for a woman. Chris points out that she has always delivered the paper alone, causing Watts to realize the flaw in his own reasoning. She admits that she should have been more careful now that the Magic Guild is actively hunting for their supplier. Watts panics as they realize that any adventurer carrying the recognizable case would immediately attract attention. He asks Chris if she would like him to deliver the items instead to avoid drawing unwanted scrutiny. Chris agrees to let him take the lead while she follows at a distance to act as his escort. Watts reveals his investigation skill, a lower-tier appraisal ability that allows him to properly analyze magical items. He explains that he can also use the skill on people to check for threats or harmful intentions. The group boards a horse-drawn carriage, hoping the vehicle will provide enough security for the delivery mission. Suddenly, Watts screams a warning for Chris to watch out as a hidden danger targets them. A cloaked figure emerges from the shadows and aggressively attempts to grab the young girl in the street. Chris tumbles to the ground as the attacker shouts for her to run while the struggle intensifies. Reaching into her gear, she prepares to use a wind magical paper to send the assailant flying away. The mysterious attacker lunges forward through the air with predatory speed, attempting to complete the kidnapping. Chris condemns the villain for attacking a young girl in broad daylight, calling his actions absolutely despicable. A friendly adventurer arrives on the scene and asks Chris if she is okay or if she has been hurt. A heavy breath escapes into the quiet air as the chaotic confrontation finally settles. Smiling gently, the armored adventurer checks on the tiny girl and asks if the terrifying ordeal left her hurt. Still recovering from the sudden ambush, she looks up and gratefully thanks him for the timely rescue. Panting heavily from exertion, a frantic Watts crawls over to check if Chris is safe. Watts explains the complicated situation to his savior, while the amused swordsman advises him to keep a closer eye on the little girl. Disgusted by the city's crime, the young warrior angrily condemns the thugs for casually attacking a child in broad daylight. Turning his attention back to his tiny companion, a deeply regretful Watts offers her a sincere apology. Observing their bizarre interaction, the swordsman silently confirms his suspicion that the strange man belongs to the legendary Neon tribe. Watts confirms that he secured the requested magical paper, and the warrior suggests moving their conversation indoors. Leaning in with a friendly grin, the young man offers to personally escort Chris back to her home later. Waving his hands in absolute panic, he desperately clarifies that he is not a pervert and promises not to touch her. Watts sweats nervously, realizing the little girl will never understand the bizarre slang unique to the Neon tribe. The overly enthusiastic swordsman suddenly leans in uncomfortably close to inspect her. Clutching her satchel defensively, the wary traveler stares back with a mixture of confusion and mild apprehension. Unfazed by her caution, the young man simply flashes her a brilliantly warm and completely innocent smile. Despite his friendly demeanor, a lingering bead of sweat forms on her cheek as she wonders if he actually is a creep. The trio heads into the bustling guild headquarters, blending into the crowd of armored adventurers checking the boards, hoping to avoid any messy tribal politics. Chris silently plans to hand off the paper and leave. While Watts suggests finding a private room, catching her off guard, the cheerful warrior turns back and casually invites the tiny girl to join their private meeting. A nervous Watts defends the invitation by pointing out that Chris is the very person fulfilling their urgent request. The swordsman easily deduces the secret, noting that the ambush makes perfect sense if she is their mysterious supplier. Brushing off Watts's panic over the confidentiality breach, the warrior playfully mocks the guild's pathetic attempts to hide their feud. Flashing a casual peace sign, the energetic young man happily introduces himself as Ruka. Staring up at the eccentric adventurer, the tiny girl politely introduces herself as Chris. The unlikely trio settles into the plush couches of a private VIP room to discuss their business. Ruka holds up the glowing sheets of magical paper, his eyes widening as he meticulously inspects the craftsmanship. He admits that the quality is surprisingly excellent, validating Watts's absolute trust in the tiny creator. Ruka downplays his combat prowess as mid-tier, while a curious Chris asks if he is heading straight back into the dangerous labyrinth. Casually shifting the topic, Ruka directly asks Chris if she possesses the rare magical inscriber skill. Realizing his social blunder, he nervously chuckles and admits he forgot that people in this world fiercely guard information about their abilities. Chris frankly denies having the high-tier skill, pointing out that the Magic Guild would have forcefully hired her if she did. Ruka bursts into laughter at her pragmatic logic, completely agreeing with her blunt assessment of the greedy guild. Without a shred of hesitation, he loudly lists off his own impressive array of mobility and strength skills to a baffled Chris. The revelation instantly clicks in her mind, explaining exactly how he tossed a grown man around like a rag doll earlier. Ruka humbly dismisses himself as a weakling compared to top-tier elites, though Chris insists that his strength is completely incredible. A soft blush spreads across the young warrior's scarred cheeks at her genuine and unprompted praise. Announcing her intention to return to her inn and finish working, she inadvertently reveals to Ruka that she is just a wandering foreigner. Horrified by the thought of a tiny child traveling completely alone, an incredibly concerned Ruka frantically asks whether she belongs to a party. His eyes suddenly light up with a brilliant, reckless idea as he enthusiastically demands that she join their elite squad. He justifies his wild proposal by declaring that real men cannot simply abandon a helpless little girl to the harsh world. Brushing off her lack of combat power, he points out her extreme value as an on-the-spot magical paper crafter. A completely panicked Watts interrupts the madness, furiously scolding Ruka for trying to drag a minor into a deadly labyrinth. Ignoring the lecture entirely, Ruka stubbornly insists that fighting alongside an elite team is far safer than wandering the streets alone. Puffing out her cheeks in annoyance, Chris proudly declares that she is perfectly fine because she has loyal companions and a custom house carriage. Both men freeze in absolute stunned silence as the sheer absurdity of a child building a mobile home registers in their minds. Eagerly leaning forward, Ruka completely ignores her travel plans and loudly marvels at her incredible engineering skills. Staring at his starry-eyed expression, she lets out a defeated sigh as she realizes he is not listening to a single word she says. A sudden, sharp knock echoes through the private room, abruptly pausing their chaotic conversation. An apologetic guild staffer peeks inside, urgently informing Watts that a high-ranking security official is waiting for him. Watts nervously presents the stern, mustached squad leader who commands the entire Western District security force. Looking up with a solemn expression, the tiny girl apologizes and mentions that she heard all about the guy's situation from Watts. The mustached squad leader firmly declares that the city refuses to simply turn a blind eye when hard-working adventurers become victims. He explains that honest residents deserve true protection, revealing that the idea to grant her semi-citizen status was actually his own. Sitting across from her, the official politely asks the young traveler to recount exactly what happened during the latest ambush. Listening intently to her harrowing tale, he deeply sympathizes with the awful ordeals she has recently endured. Suddenly bursting with rage, Ruka violently swings his arms and vows to beat the absolute crap out of the attacker for targeting such a cute girl. The stoic squad leader promises a thorough investigation to deliver proper punishment, earning a deeply grateful smile from the relieved traveler. The official strongly urges her to relocate to a secure guild-partnered inn, though she immediately panics about her pet bird returning to her old room. Flashing a cheerful grin, Ruka suggests simply leaving a message with her old innkeeper and eagerly offers to move her belongings using his storage skill. Her expression darkens as she realizes that staying at a luxury inn means she will have to pay for expensive meals entirely out of her own pocket. Back at her old lodging, the sweet landlady deeply apologizes for failing to notice the ambush, while Ruka gently assures her that it could not have been helped. The older woman warmly invites her to return once the danger passes, prompting the tiny adventurer to fiercely assure her that she did nothing wrong. Arriving at her new accommodation, the tiny traveler gazes up in absolute awe at the towering, cathedral-like luxury inn. Her anxieties melt away as she happily realizes that the inn is incredibly close to the guild headquarters, allowing her to visit Peruchan whenever she wants. Sinking deeply into the luxurious mattress, the tiny girl hilariously complains that the bed is far too fluffy for her to actually fall asleep. Embracing her massive steed with a joyful smile, she cherishes the fact that the luxury inn allows her to visit him every morning and night. She happily notes that since the energetic Ruka immediately headed off to the labyrinth, she is finally free from being dragged into his chaotic antics. Enjoying the profound peace and quiet, she realizes that this temporary relocation is actually the perfect opportunity to focus entirely on her drafting work. Her focused work is suddenly interrupted as a sharp, rhythmic tapping echoes directly from her closed window. Throwing the window open, a massive smile lights up her face as she joyfully scoops her returning feathered friend into a warm embrace. Gently holding the tiny bird, she eagerly asks if the request was successful before noticing a strange magical symbol glowing on the parchment. Her eyes widen in pure confusion as she deciphers the message. Realizing that a powerful spirit is coming to help instead of a senior fairy, she stares blankly at the magical text. A sudden chill runs down her spine as the paper boldly declares that the mysterious spirit has already arrived. Whipping her head around in sheer panic, the young girl locks eyes with a bizarre, smooth-skinned humanoid standing silently in the middle of her room. The strange entity stares back with large hollow eyes, emitting a series of incomprehensible digital beeps and bizarre symbols. Jolting in surprise, she confirms that she builds houses as the mysterious being speaks, leaving her with a strange feeling of intense déjà vu. Her vivid imagination immediately kicks in, comparing the strange creature to a classic captured alien from her past life's pop culture. The brave little bird aggressively flutters toward the intruder to protect his master, though the bizarre entity calmly waves him off. Standing completely still, the smooth-skinned spirit formally announces that it will grant her request, provided she meets one specific condition. Tilting her head in sheer disbelief, the tiny engineer clarifies that her only payment is to construct a custom house suitable for a magical spirit. The spirit openly admits that its curiosity was sparked entirely by Isa constantly bragging about his luxurious custom-built woven mansion. She eagerly accepts the bizarre contract, and the spirit surprisingly agrees to patiently wait until her urgent guild work is fully completed. Grabbing her notebook and pen, the tiny architect firmly shifts into work mode and asks the spirit exactly what kind of design it prefers. The strange entity bluntly demands a movable, square, human-style house with perfectly straight lines and a dedicated entrance just for its bird friends. Pushing for interior details, she asks about preferred furniture, only for the entity to flatly state that it has absolutely no need for such things. Flashing a confident smile, the young engineer swiftly drafts a neat blueprint and eagerly presents the customized design to her strange new client. Her bright smile instantly vanishes into absolute bewilderment as a sudden, impossible transformation occurs right before her eyes. The bizarre gray alien seamlessly morphs into an incredibly cute, pointy-eared dwarven boy, leaving the stunned traveler utterly speechless. Rubbing her tired eyes, she points out his previous alien form, prompting the tiny dwarf to proudly explain that he only reveals himself to trusted allies. Standing tall despite his tiny stature, the spirit officially introduces himself with an unpronounceable name but graciously allows her to simply call him Perupi. Since his new home is not ready yet, the energetic little dwarf casually floats into the air and decides to go sightseeing around the bustling city. Watching him drift away, a sudden jolt of realization strikes the tiny engineer. She frantically waves her arms and screams at him to stop, desperately reminding the spirit about his half of the magical bargain. The floating dwarf nervously laughs and claims that he had not forgotten the crucial fountain pen nib, though Chris fiercely accuses him of absolutely forgetting. Shifting the topic, the curious spirit floats back to her work desk and demands to see exactly how she uses her specialized drafting tools. Sitting diligently at her wooden desk, the tiny adventurer expertly guides her pen across the magical paper while the tiny dwarf watches in awe. Deeply impressed by her flawless craftsmanship, the dwarven spirit confidently promises to forge the absolute best pen nib his magical abilities can muster. Throwing her hands up in pure joy, the ecstatic girl cheers wildly and loudly declares her absolute love for the tiny artisan. Caught completely off guard by her intense affection, the little dwarf freezes in place with a deeply stunned expression. Without hesitation, she joyfully scoops the tiny spirit into a massive bear hug, then nervously asks if he dislikes being violently cuddled. Staring up with incredibly sparkly eyes, the heavily blushing dwarf bluntly demands that she continue cuddling him. Sweating nervously, the utterly baffled girl stares down at the squished spirit and realizes he is thoroughly enjoying the physical affection. Meanwhile, deep within the deadly labyrinth, an awestruck mage marvels at the incredibly smooth activation of Chris's custom-made magical paper. Boasting loudly to his weary party, an energetic Ruka proudly declares that the genius crafter is an incredibly cute girl who is total waifu material. His disgusted female teammate immediately calls him gross, prompting the fiery swordsman to angrily scream at them to shut up. A calm voice weakly begs the chaotic party members to stop fighting as the elite team continues its dangerous descent into the dark abyss. Next chapter, a beautiful woman with long, wavy hair gazes downward with a stoic expression. Recalling her childhood, Chris narrates how she began assisting the sharp-tongued witch Sama at age 5, before even discovering her own magical skill. Despite the older woman's complaints about disliking troublesome children, she kindly asks the little girl if she is hurt anywhere else. Nestled deep within the lush woods, witch Sama's charming cottage serves as their secluded sanctuary. Every so often, a mysterious delivery man arrives from above, gently lowering massive wooden crates directly from the sky. Because the heavy packages are far too large for a child, the tiny apprentice opens them outside and carries the contents inside piece by piece. Prying open one of the crates, her eyes widen in absolute wonder at what she discovers inside. Holding up a beautifully decorated white tin, the amazed young girl compares it to a precious jewelry box. Glancing over her shoulder, Witch-sama dismissively remarks that it is just the same old boring stuff. Without another word, the powerful magic user effortlessly floats through the air toward the kitchen. Startling the little girl, the witch casually mentions that she deeply dislikes sweets anyway. She sharply scolds her tiny apprentice, warning her that she could have easily broken the fragile contents. Utterly baffled that the fancy box merely contains food, Chris listens as her mentor explains that it doesn't require such careful handling. Realizing the young girl has never even had a cookie before, the witch promises her a delightful surprise. Handing the exquisite box over, the older woman declares it a well-earned reward for her hard work, but strictly warns her not to eat them all at once. Blushing fiercely, the nervous child hugs the precious tin to her chest and stammers out a heartfelt thank you. A genuinely warm smile breaks across Witch-sama's face as she notes that her apprentice is finally making an expression fitting for a normal kid. Caught completely off guard by the rare display of affection, the tiny girl stares up with wide, innocent eyes. The witch promises a tea break once the chores are finished, instructing the eager child to fetch milk for herself. Fueled by the promise of sweet treats, the energetic apprentice practically sprints through the yard to finish carrying the heavy boxes. A perfectly set wooden table features a delicate teacup, a tall glass of cold milk, and a perfectly baked cookie. Sitting politely at the table, the eager young girl clasps her hands together and gratefully thanks her mentor for the meal. With her heart pounding in anticipation, she carefully takes her very first bite of the sweet confection. A brilliant rosy smile instantly blooms across her face as the delicious flavor fills her mouth. Across the table, Witch-sama peacefully closes her eyes and enjoys a warm sip of her brandy-infused tea. Staring fondly at her lovely white box, the tiny apprentice cherishes the sweet memories and the quiet moment of true happiness.